She told everyone I was violent, that I slammed doors, that I broke things, that I left bruises, and for a long time, I believed her. Because when someone you love says you hurt them, what do? You apologize, you shrink, you question yourself. But the truth was darker and lonelier. It wasn't just lies, it was performance, or maybe illness, or both. And the more I tried to fix things, the more she made me the monster. But everything changed when I found her medical records, the psychiatric evaluations, the prescriptions, the pieces she tried to hide. This is the story of how I uncovered the truth behind the woman I thought I knew. How I walked through the fire of manipulation, gaslighting, and grief, and came out the other side. It's not a story about revenge. It's a story about finally choosing myself. I remember the first time I heard the word violent used to describe me. It wasn't shouted in the heat of an argument or whispered in fear. It was written, cold, formal, black ink on a white sheet. A sentence on a court document that read, "The defendant has exhibited patterns of violent behavior, as attested by his spouse." My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't catch. Something deeper happened. Like a crack ran through the center of who I believed I was, quiet and deliberate, as if it had been waiting to split open for a long time. I stared at those words for what felt like hours, violent, as if I were a danger, a man to be feared, as if the face I kissed every morning, the body I held through insomnia and panic attacks, now recoiled at my touch, like a wound afraid of being touched again. But that's not the beginning. The beginning was quieter, much quieter. The kind of quiet that makes you question yourself long before anyone else does. We lived in a modest house in Vermont, snow-wrapped and creaking through the long winters. My wife, Lara, liked things in order. Pillows straight, spices alphabetized, her lavender tea brewed for exactly 5 minutes. I used to think it was charming. Now, looking back, I wonder if it was the first sign. She said I made her anxious, that my presence pressed on her chest like sleep paralysis, that I had a way of controlling the air. I didn't know what that meant. Still don't. I did raise my voice sometimes. When she disappeared into herself for days. When the food spoiled because she wouldn't get out of bed. When the bills were late. I would plead, sometimes yell, but never hit. Never. She started seeing a new psychiatrist around the time I took a second job to keep us afloat. Said the previous one didn't understand her depth. That was her phrase. The new one kept her on 3 different prescriptions, mood stabilizers, anti-anxiety meds, something else she wouldn't name. She got quieter, her pupils dilated, her sleep deeper, her lies better. I remember one night vividly. It was early February, the kind of cold that gets into your teeth. I came home late, exhausted. I had snow in my boots, and my fingers were burning from the wind. The lights were off. I called her name. Nothing. Then I found her sitting in the bathtub, clothes on, water cold. She looked up and whispered, "You scare me sometimes." That's when something inside me broke. Not because I felt guilt, but because I didn't know if she was lying, or if she believed it. The next week, she filed a report. Told the therapist I had outbursts, that I followed her around the house, that I was possessive. She said I isolated her from her friends. The truth? She cut them off herself, saying they were toxic. Said she only needed me. Said I was the only one who got her. I see now what I didn't then, how someone can rewrite reality with just enough conviction that even you start to wonder. Still, part of me clung to logic. I knew I wasn't perfect. Who is? But I wasn't violent. I wasn't cruel. I held her through panic attacks, kept track of her pills, cleaned vomit from the floor after her episodes. I loved her, but the story she began to tell, to others, to professionals, to herself, was different. And then, one morning, weeks later, I was organizing papers for the lawyer. That's when I found it. Her medical file, a copy she'd printed and left at the back of the cabinet. Probably forgotten. Or maybe she thought I'd never go there. It wasn't what I expected. It was the header that struck me first. Patient exhibits signs of dissociative behavior and selective memory distortion. I stood there, half kneeling on the cold hardwood floor, the papers trembling just slightly in my hands. Not because I was afraid, but because something was beginning to make a terrible, precise kind of sense. The file wasn't short. It wasn't vague. Pages of notes, psychiatric assessments, not just from the latest doctor, but 3 others, some from years ago, some she never told me about. Patient reports, hallucinations, auditory and visual, though, denies their occurrence during follow-up. Contradictions in personal history observed across sessions. Possible factitious disorder by proxy requires further observation. I read those lines over and over, as if reading them differently might make them mean something else. I traced the handwriting of different doctors, the cold professionalism of their language. But between the lines, I could hear it. The fear of saying something too direct, the hesitation to label her, but the reluctance to ignore the signs. And there was something else. A note, dated 3 years before she filed the report on me. Patient previously claimed to have been harmed by spouse. However, no physical signs present. Narrative inconsistent with earlier medical records and witness accounts, 3 years ago. That meant this wasn't the first time. She'd said something like this before. Made claims, changed the story, moved on. My ears rang. The silence in the house was so complete, it felt like pressure. Like the walls were listening. That night, I didn't say anything. She asked me how my day was. I lied, told her it was uneventful. She smiled with that faraway look, like she was drifting in a dream I didn't have the map for. I began watching, quietly, observing her routines, the way she took her pills, or didn't, the way she would stare at the window for hours, whispering under her breath when she thought I couldn't hear. She kept a small notebook by her bedside. When she went to shower, I opened it. Inside were pages of her handwriting, loops and slants and corrections, phrases like how to show trauma, details about bruises, stage 1 healing, and one line circled twice. People believe. Women. I don't know how long I sat there with that notebook in my hand. The shower ran upstairs, a thin, constant hiss, but everything else felt suspended in amber. It was then I understood. This wasn't just about me. This was something she carried long before I entered the picture. Something deeper than malice. Twisted, roots that reached into parts of her mind that even she probably couldn't see clearly. But the consequences were real. I was being investigated, judged, watched, and she was being believed. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more than gut feeling and scribbled notes. I needed to understand why. And so I began to dig. Into her past, her family, her medical history, into the people she'd cut off. People she said had abandoned her. And what I found? What I found turned everything into something darker than I had imagined. It started with a name. A doctor from Connecticut she once mentioned in passing, saying he never helped. I called his old office. The receptionist said he'd retired. I left my name, half expecting nothing, but 2 days later, he called me back. He remembered her. Clearly. Too clearly. I shouldn't be saying anything, he said, voice grave, careful. But if she's making accusations again, you should be very careful. There was a pause. Then, with a slow inhale, he told me, she came to me years ago, said her father abused her. Then a month later, she said it was her mother. A few weeks after that, she said it was her uncle, then denied all of it. She cried each time. She was convincing, but it never held. There were no records, no consistencies. Eventually, she stopped. Coming. Said I was trying to gaslight her. He stopped short of naming it, but I'd started to see it for myself. A fractured world she lived in, where every person eventually became a villain in her script, where she was the wounded heroine in a story she kept rewriting. I hung up the phone and sat at the kitchen table for a long time, hands flat on the surface, listening to the tick of the old wall clock. I went through her emails next. I shouldn't have. I know that. But suspicion has a way of burning through morals. What I found were drafts, unsent emails to friends she no longer spoke to. In them, she practiced phrasing, "He's controlling. I'm scared he'll get worse. It's hard to tell anyone. He seems so normal." But none were ever sent. It was as if she was rehearsing, not cries for help, but a performance, writing the act until she could deliver it flawlessly. One day, I found her in the living room staring blankly at the fireplace. Her tea had gone cold. She was whispering again. I moved closer, heart hammering. They never listen until there's blood. I didn't say anything, didn't ask what she meant. I just walked upstairs and sat in the dark for an hour, trying to piece together whether the woman I married had ever truly existed. Then came the final blow. I tracked down her old college roommate, Emily. After some hesitation, she agreed to meet me. We sat in a quiet coffee shop, and she looked tired the moment I said Lara's name. She accused our professor of touching her. Then another one. Then a student. Each time the stories changed. She used to wake up crying, say I was part of it. She'd scream in her sleep. I tried to help, but then she accused me of drugging her. After that, I cut her off. I couldn't live in that nightmare anymore. I asked why she never reported it, never warned anyone. She looked at me with a hollow kind of guilt, because when someone cries like that and shakes like that, you start to doubt yourself. You think, what if it's true? And then, when it's not, when it's just shadows in her mind, it's too late. You're already in the story. I left that meeting with the wind slicing through my coat, my thoughts spiraling. There was no single lie, no singular incident. I could point to that would make it all collapse. It was all sand, slowly shifting, soft, subtle, suffocating. But I had enough now, enough to see the full picture. The woman who told the world I was violent wasn't just cruel. She was broken. And somewhere in that brokenness, she learned how to survive, by making others the villain. And now, I had to figure out how to step out of her story, without becoming the ending she wanted. I didn't sleep much after that. My body would lie down, but my mind wouldn't follow. It kept replaying the way she'd look at me when I walked into a room. like she was watching for something I hadn't done yet. Like she was waiting for the moment she could finally say, "See? There. That's what I meant." I started documenting everything, every conversation, every incident, every strange behavior. Not for revenge, not even for self-preservation at first. It was something else, something quieter, a need to make sure I wasn't going insane. Because she made me doubt myself. Not just the facts, but the feeling of them. I'd stand in the hallway and try to remember. Did I slam that door? Did I raise my voice? Did I grip her wrist too hard when she wouldn't let me leave the room? But memory isn't evidence, especially not when someone's already rewritten it for you. So I got smart. I spoke less, stayed calm, kept my distance. I reinstalled the security cameras she made me take down a year ago, saying they made her feel watched. I framed it as concern for safety, the neighborhood, break-ins. I kept the cameras hidden. And then I waited. One morning, I left for work, lingered just long enough to watch her through the kitchen window. She was pacing, her phone in one hand, her other hand scratching her arm like something was crawling underneath. That afternoon, I came home to find a voicemail from her psychiatrist. Calm, professional, vaguely uneasy. "We'd like to schedule a meeting with both of you. Lara reported an incident today. She's okay, but understandably shaken." There it was, the first match lit. I pulled the camera footage, and what I saw chilled me. She walked to the living room, stood still for 5 minutes, then slowly tipped over the coffee table, waited, walked to the kitchen, knocked over a chair, sat on the floor, breathing heavily, picked up the phone and dialed. The call lasted 7 minutes. She cried twice, told them I'd thrown things again, said I'd left bruises. Her voice was low, trembling, perfectly tuned, but the footage told another story. And suddenly, I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was uncovering a performance, a manipulation so methodical it mimicked truth. Still, I didn't confront her. I played the part. Soft voice, careful steps, gentle hands. I cooked her meals, asked her how she felt, watched her eyes for flickers of guilt. But there were none. She was so deep in the lie, I think she believed it. And that's when I realized something. She didn't want to destroy me. Not really. She wanted to be saved. From herself. From the ghosts she stitched into her memory. But the only way she knew how to cry for help was to create a monster. I started preparing for the confrontation quietly, like setting a trap in a place you used to call home. I backed up every clip, every file. I found her old prescriptions, photos, voice memos. I printed her medical inconsistencies, put everything into a black folder. One night, I stood at the foot of our bed, watching her sleep. Moonlight stretched across her face like silver water. She looked peaceful, almost innocent. I hated her for that, and I loved her still. The next morning, I told her we were going to therapy, together. She blinked, confused, then smiled. Finally, she whispered, "You're taking this seriously." She had no idea. The therapist's office was warm, sterile, quiet in the way a trap is, quiet just before it snaps shut. The walls were painted soft gray, the kind of color that makes you feel like you should whisper, even if you're drowning inside. Lara sat next to me, knees pressed together, fingers wrapped around the strap of her bag like she was bracing for an earthquake no one else could feel. I held the black folder on my lap. I could feel its weight, Not just paper and ink, but a year's worth of unraveling. Of watching someone I loved dissolve into someone I didn't recognize. The therapist, Dr. Lively, looked like someone trained to show compassion without offering comfort. Her eyes moved between us. Calm. Curious. "So," she said, "what brought you both here today?" Lara didn't hesitate. "He agreed we need help. After the things that have been happening." Her voice cracked just enough to sell the moment. She didn't overplay it. She was good at that. Just the right shade of victim. I looked at the doctor, then at Lara. My throat tightened. "Actually," I said quietly, "I'd like to share something first." I opened the folder slowly, slid it across the table toward Dr. Lively. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might rise up out of my chest and confess everything for me. "What is this?" Lara asked, voice light, almost laughing. Dr. Lively flipped through the contents. Her brow furrowed. Her silence stretched longer than I expected. She reached a page and stopped. A camera still. Lara in the living room, mid-performance. A timestamp at the bottom. Lara leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. "What is that?" More silence. Dr. Lively's eyes moved down the page. "These are surveillance images?" "Yes," I said. "Of the incident she reported last week." Lara's breath caught. I heard it. Just the smallest hitch. She blinked. "You're spying on me?" "No," I said softly. "I was protecting myself, because I started to realize that what was happening wasn't just in my head, and it wasn't only emotional, it was constructed, engineered." Dr. Lively looked at Lara. "You said he overturned the table, that he shouted." He did. That's not." She laughed again, too high, too brittle. "This is crazy. You're siding with him?" "No one's siding with anyone," Dr. Lively said carefully. "I'm only looking at what's been shared." Lara stood. "This is abuse. He's gaslighting me right now." "No," I said gently, still sitting. "This is the part where I stop letting you." She froze, her hands curled in front of her chest like shields. I continued, voice low and even. "I know about the college accusations, the rehearsed emails, the unsent messages, the doctors who warned you, the reports that don't match. I didn't want this to be true. I begged for it not to be true. I loved you," I added, barely able to get the words out. Dr. Lively set the folder down. "Lara," she said, her voice more clinical now, "can I ask, have you been feeling detached lately? From reality? Or from your emotions?" "I'm fine." Lara's eyes were glass now. Not angry. Blank. She looked at me like I was a stranger. "He's trying to turn you against me." Dr. Lively leaned in gently. "I want to help you, but you have to be willing to let me." Lara didn't respond. She just stood there, hands trembling. Then, slowly, her face collapsed. No scream, no accusation, just tears, silent, streaming. Her body folded in on itself like something gave out. It wasn't an admission, but it wasn't denial either. That's when I realized she didn't know who she was in that moment. The villain, the victim, the actress, or the girl lost in the middle of all of it. She left the room quietly. No slamming doors, no threats. Just vanished. Dr. Lively looked at me. "You were right to come in. You need to protect yourself. But she needs serious help." I nodded, hollow, empty. grief flooding in where the fear used to live. "I don't think she ever meant to hurt me," I whispered. "But she did, and I let her." I walked out with the folder still in my hand. But I left a part of myself in that room, whatever was left of the man who used to believe love could fix anything. The house felt different after that day, quieter, but not in the comforting way. More like a room where a music box had stopped playing mid-note, where something invisible still lingered in the corners, watching, waiting. She didn't come home that night, or the next. I didn't call. I didn't text. I knew she wasn't in danger. Her patterns were predictable, even in chaos. When the illusion shattered, she always retreated. To somewhere she could rewrite the script. I imagined her at a friend's place, or maybe in a hotel room, crafting the next story in her head, trying to make sense of what had slipped through her fingers. What I hadn't expected was what came next. 2 weeks passed. Then, a letter. No return address, no message inside, just one of the photos I had printed from the camera footage. Folded once. Neat. Deliberate. On the back, in her handwriting. I didn't want to be the bad guy. That was all. I stared at those words for hours, my fingertips running over the ink like it might still be warm. Part of me wanted to cry. Another part wanted to scream. But mostly, I just felt something crumbling. Because I had hoped, God help me, I had hoped, that if I showed her the truth, she would wake up. That she would choose clarity over distortion. That she would look me in the eye and say, "I see it now. I'm sorry." But she hadn't. She ran. Again. Because in her world, villains can't be confronted, only escaped. I knew then that she wasn't coming back. At least, not as the woman I married. But then, a few days later, I got a call. It was her sister, a woman I'd only met once, briefly, at our wedding. She'd been cold, distant, suspicious even then. Now, her voice was tense, but not angry. "She's in the hospital," she said. "Psychiatric hold. She was found walking down the middle of a road in Delaware. Said someone was after her. Said her husband was trying to erase her." I didn't speak. "She listed you as her emergency contact," the sister added. "They almost didn't call. But I thought you should know." I asked if she was okay. "She's alive," the sister said. "I don't know about the rest." That night, I drove. I told myself I wouldn't, but something in me needed to see her, if only to understand the full shape of the damage. The hospital was quiet. White walls, sterile light. I walked past nurses who didn't make eye contact. A woman buzzed me in. Her eyes lingered on me like she was studying a piece of paper with too many redacted lines. When I stepped into the observation room, there she was. Lara. Thin, tired, older somehow. Her hair was messy, her eyes distant, but she smiled when she saw me. Not wide, not manic, just soft, as if I were part of a memory she hadn't quite let go of yet. She reached her hand to the glass between us. "I didn't know what was real anymore," she said quietly. I pressed my hand to the other side, not touching. Just there. "I know," I whispered, and for the first time, there was no performance, no rewriting, just her. Fragile. Human. But the damage was done. She stayed in the hospital for 32 days. I didn't visit again after the first time. I wrote her a letter, though. 2 pages. No blame, no anger, just the truth. I told her that I loved her once, that I still didn't know where the real version of her ended and the stories began. I told her I forgave her. Not because it was easy, but because I couldn't carry it anymore. Then I folded the letter, sealed it, and left it at the front desk, with her name written in small, neat letters. I drove home in silence. The roads felt longer than before, the trees thinner. Everything looked exposed, honest in a way it hadn't been when we were still pretending. After she was released, she didn't contact me, and I didn't try to reach her. Some wounds don't heal by coming back together. They heal by being allowed to close, gently, without pressure. I filed for divorce 3 months later. She didn't contest it. No threats, no drama. Just signed the papers and sent them back through a lawyer I never spoke to. I kept the house, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to prove I could live in it again without watching that shadows, without listening for footsteps in the night that might end in lies. I packed up her things slowly. I didn't burn anything, didn't throw a single box away. Each item, her scarves, her dog-eared novels, her perfume half-used on the bathroom shelf, I placed gently into cardboard. That's when I found it. A notebook wedged behind the dresser. Spiral-bound. Leather cover. Her handwriting all over it. I should have thrown it out. I almost did. But I opened it. Inside were pages of memories, or attempts at them. Scrambled, inconsistent, repeated. One entry stood out. The ink had run in places, like she cried while writing. He looks at me like I'm someone worth saving, but I'm not. I hurt him. I know I do. But I don't know how to stop. I don't know what's real anymore. Maybe none of it was. I closed the book and sat with it in my lap for a long time. There was no villain, no hero, just damage, and the people left holding its weight. The months passed quietly. I started over. New routines, new spaces. I even started dating again. Not because I was healed, but because healing sometimes happens in motion, not in stillness. One evening, I got an email from her sister. Short, blunt. She's doing better. Medicated, in a program. She talks about you sometimes. I stared at that line, reread it, then deleted the message. That was her story now, whatever version she told. It didn't belong to me anymore. Mine is this. I loved someone who was broken, and in trying to help her, I nearly broke myself, but I didn't. And if you're listening, if someone has ever told you that your reality is wrong, that your truth is too loud, or that your kindness is dangerous, remember this. You don't owe anyone your undoing. You don't have to become the villain in someone else's story just because they need one. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's survival. And sometimes the most painful love stories are the ones that end with, I let them go. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel. It really helps. Click the video on the screen, and I'll see you there.